Going to get going here in just a minute, everybody. Appreciate you stopping by. All right. Ready to go. It might just be me for a little bit. We got the other guys working, but we're here to wrap up Florida's 49-7 win over McNeese. I'm Keith Niebuhr with Gators Online. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Let me do a quick check on the microphone here. All right, sounds like it's good. We got a little echo. I didn't make it to the game. I'm at home today, watching closely, talking to recruits and all that stuff. So again, a big win for the Florida Gators, 49-7 over McNeese. We're going to wrap things up. We're going to take your questions a little bit later. We hope that Nick Torre, one of our beat writers for Gators Online, is going to be able to join us on the show. But again, significant in the sense that Florida needed a feel-good win. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And it was a clean game until the very end. And that's really what Florida needed. Coming off the 24-11 loss in Utah, and a lot of us were at that game. A lot of you watched the game, and it was disappointing on so many levels because the amount of self-inflicted wounds, the 3rd and 1 penalties, the 4th down penalties, the miscommunication on defense early in the game. Florida obviously picked it up in that game, but overall that 24-11 loss at number 14 Utah, good team, but a team without its starting quarterback, without some other stars, really left a bad taste in the mouths of everybody listening and everybody in Gator Nation. So this was the kind of win that Florida really needed, obviously. And so what did Florida do well? Well, early on in this game, Florida set the tone by opening massive holes with the offensive line. And the offensive line played much better this week. And obviously, much of that has to do with the opponent. But in a sense, that's both relevant and irrelevant. Obviously, you'd like to see Florida's offensive line be able to block like that against an SEC team. But they weren't playing an SEC team today. And they just needed to take several steps forward in the right direction on Saturday, and I think they did that. Lindell Hudson got a lot of snaps at right tackle and looked good. And overall, Jake Slaughter, the backup center who's had to start 2 weeks in a row with Kingsley Aguakin out, I think overall he has performed admirably in that role, significantly better today. But as a unit, the offensive line, first and foremost, needed to prove that they could block. This is a team that's supposed to have a vaunted rushing attack, the Florida Gators, in 2023. And we didn't see anything like that in week 1. Now, part of that was due to the fact that once Florida fell behind, they had to deviate from the game plan. So that was significant. But in week 2, Florida didn't have to deviate from the game plan at all. And early on, it was obvious what the game plan was, and that was to grind it out. And that's what Florida did. And I've got some numbers for you real quick here. We're going to go over some of the final stats. Florida rushed for 327 yards on 51 carries. Now, that's after rushing for only 13 yards last week. Now, obviously, some of the losses in the passing game last week with the quarterback getting sacked, Graham Mertz, really impacted Florida's ground game. But again, 327 rushing yards, 51 carries, 6.4 yards per carry. All told, Florida had 560 yards of offense. And this was a very conservative game plan. They probably could have had 750 yards of offense, but they were content with grinding it out and winning that way, establishing that ground game. And please, everybody, leave your comments. We're going to get all your comments up here. We're going to get your questions. It might be me riding solo for a while. Zach Alberverdi is writing right now from Florida Field. I still call it Florida Field. Nick Torre hopes to join us in a little bit. They're writing. Actually, right now they're interviewing Billy Napier and players, but they'll be able to join us hopefully later on in the show. So we're going to break things down. Again, Florida, 560 yards of offense. McNeese, 112 yards of offense. And that was really the other story of the game. So not only did Florida get its ground game going, but it really kept McNeese from getting into any kind of offensive rhythm. Now, look, it's not a great team. The Cowboys lost to Tarleton State last week and gave up 50 points and over 500 yards in a little bit of a shootout. So it's not a great team. This was exactly what the doctor ordered for the Florida Gators, though. All right. 33 first downs for Florida, 6 for McNeese, 112 total yards for McNeese. Now let's go over some individual stats for Florida. Graham Mertz, quarterback, after going 31 of 44 last week for over 300 yards. He set a career high, first time in his career, over 300 yards. Today, 14 of 17 for 193 yards, 1 touchdown. Very efficient. He had the 50-yard pass to Ricky Pearsall in the third quarter, but otherwise was content with settling for shorter passes, and really letting the ground game do the damage. He was the what you would say, the game manager that everybody has thought he would be. That's all he needed to be today. The rushing attack, again, Montrell Johnson, 15 carries, 119 yards, 2 touchdowns, 7.9 yards a carry. Now, that's what you expect against McNeese. Trevor Etienne, 11 carries, 84 yards, 1 touchdown, 7.6 yards per carry. A real bright spot, Treyon, I always want to call him Trayvon. Treyon Webb out of Jacksonville, true freshman running back. He looked pretty good. 14 carries, 71 yards, 5.1 yards. All 3 running backs. Again, how do you judge them in a game like this? Well, they didn't make any mistakes. They hit the holes hard. They showed great balance. I think Etienne's the best cutter of the group, but there were some runs that I think Montrell Johnson really felt and looked comfortable with what you call the one cut, putting the foot in the ground, planting the foot and going off to it in another direction, starting and stopping, that kind of stuff. And then the acceleration, twitchy, they say. And, Treyon Webb, well, we know Trevor Etienne is going to do that week in and week out, but Treyon Webb, I think, did that as well. And so very significant and positive signs there. On the defensive side, again, the only time McNeese really threatened outside of that late touchdown that Florida gift wrapped with the fumble was in the first quarter. You'll recall they went kind of down the field a little bit that first drive. And on third down, Scooby Williams, who quite frankly is playing very good football to the surprise of some and the surprise, no surprise others, but a lot of people were impressed by him early on, had a big third down sack that stopped that drive. And that really set the tone for the rest of the game. Defensive front was dominating. The secondary had several passes broken up. McNeese never could get anything going either via the ground or the pass. So very good defensive performance for Florida. So you say, okay, but they're playing McNeese. Well, the alternative is maybe you don't play that well and you only win by 20. You turn it over. They only had the 1 turnover late with the backups in the game. Lots of penalties. Well, they didn't have a lot of penalties. I'll give you the stat here in a second. So they didn't shoot themselves in the foot. It was the type of clean game that you needed to see from the Florida Gators, quite frankly, based on what we witnessed a week earlier. So again, Florida 33 first downs to 6. Let's look at the penalties here. Florida had the 1 fumble. Florida only had 4 penalties for 20 yards. And I believe one of those was a false start by a receiver late in the game on one of the last drives. So really, before you got to that point, you only had 3 penalties the whole game. So you've got Tennessee next week, okay? You got Tennessee. Tennessee, quite frankly, did not look great today after beating Virginia pretty soundly in week 1. Virginia turned around today and lost to James Madison. And so you got that. And then today, Tennessee beat Austin Peay, which was already 0-1 and won 30-13. That game was at one point 6-6 midway through the second quarter. Tennessee led 13-6 at the half and only won by 17 points. So I think obviously Florida played the cleaner game of the two today. And the word was Tennessee threw a lot of short passes, really played conservatively, but so did Florida. And Florida won by 42. Tennessee did that, won by 17. So all of a sudden, you have these snap judgments after week 1. And, we all watched the Utah game. And again, I was out there watching. I don't know if that even matters. Anybody that watched it on TV saw the same thing I did. When you're at a game, you always want to tell everybody that you were there. But what we saw was unclean, untidy on both sides of the ball. Defense was better in the second half. But what we didn't know and still don't know about the defense, did Utah kind of shut things down? When they got the big lead? So there's that too. So let's get to some of your comments here. Again, Keith Niebuhr with Gators Online. We're going to we're a little undermanned tonight because the other guys are working on some stories. So I'm going to try to keep you all entertained the best I can. Florida has not lost a home opener since 1989. You guys remember that game? It was Ole Miss at home. I want to say it was 24-19. I was there with my late father. And Florida actually held Ole Miss to under 150 yards that day, but still lost. So they haven't lost a home opener since then. Now, granted, they don't play very good home opener teams. I mean, that's the whole point. But it's the longest active streak in college football for home opener victories. So, again, Keith Niebuhr with Gators Online. If you like what we're doing and we're trying to do more programming, we're going to get better. Hit the like button. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please leave a comment. If I don't know it, we're going to get you the answer, all right? So let's get to some of your questions here. And Lavelle says, Richie Leonard looks like our best center. He was strong at the point of attack and should really get a look to start against Tennessee. Good points. I mean, Jake Slaughter obviously has stepped in place of Kingsley Eguakin, who is a player that's on the radar for the Senior Bowl. I mean, he's a guy that the NFL teams know about, think he's got some potential. So that's a big loss. It doesn't affect you in a game like today. It affects you the game like last week and could affect you moving forward. We'll have to see what the grades are, how the team evaluates these guys, whether they're happy with Jake Slaughter or not. The offensive line as a whole had an excellent night. Again, you look at the quality of the opponent, but again, were they clean? Yes. Were they sharp? Yes. Did they block? Did they create gaps? Yes. Yes. Did they protect Graham Mertz? Yes. So there weren't any red flags coming out of night. So after last week, that's probably hugely important for their psyche. And I talked to some members of the Florida staff this week, and they really said that the team needed a confidence builder. But good, Lavelle, that's an interesting point. We will see. We will see. Now, here's a question from Austin Rogers. I get that it was a blowout, but did we, Florida, look better? Yes, and here's why. Because a false start is a false start is a false start. Doesn't matter who you do it against, right? And if you need to cut those out no matter who you're playing. So it was a much cleaner game. Does the same blocking tonight open the same types of holes against Utah? No. Does it open the same types of holes against Tennessee? No. But again, for an offensive line, they needed to play clean. They needed to build some confidence. The running game needed to get going. And so now as the running game gets going, Tennessee is going to have a little bit more to prepare for next week, which in turn should help the passing game. All this stuff works together. All right. When Florida played Utah, they fell behind early. They weren't running well to begin with, but then when they fell behind, they completely abandoned the run. It changed the whole complexion of the game. So now you've given Tennessee all these things to look at, including an end around, I believe, to Eugene Wilson. Okay. So those are the things that now Tennessee has to study. And if you're Florida, you can build off that play and use decoys and things like that. So I think overall, it's exactly what Florida needed. Remember, these are 18 to 22, 23-year-olds. The psyche is important. The mental elements of these games is important. They have to feel like they're accomplishing things and getting better. And so, yes, they did look significantly better. And also, look, you look at the landscape of college football today, and now we don't know how good McNeese is, but we know that Tennessee kind of struggled with Austin Peay, right? We know that Kentucky, again, a Kentucky team that people are already counting as a loss for Florida, a lot of people, because it's up in Lexington. Well, Kentucky beat Eastern Kentucky 28-17 today. 28-17. Now let's go back and look what Eastern Kentucky did in week 1. They lost to Cincinnati 66-13. Today they lost to Kentucky by 11. Okay. So, there's some yin and yang here. Sometimes you don't look so good against these teams. Now LSU is just destroying Grambling. And not every FCS team is built the same, quite frankly. I mean, Austin Peay could be better than Grambling, all that stuff. But Kentucky struggled against an FCS team today. Tennessee struggled. I don't know if it struggled, but didn't look great against an FCS team. Florida played an FCS team and absolutely destroyed them. So, we'll see. Does it really mean a lot? Is that going to determine who wins next week? No, because Tennessee looked better than Florida last week. Florida looked better today. We don't know yet who these teams are. Let's be honest. Some teams had very good wins today across the country. We still don't know who they are. They need a bigger sample size. All right, Mike says, let's get to your questions here. Love to see the multiple O-line combos, some good push. Need to improve from here, but sure, look good overall. I agree. I mean, it's a building point. This was a unit that didn't have many Florida Gators starts among the starting 5 last week. Now, Micah Missoula, I get his name mispronounced all the time. He had several starts at Baylor, but at Florida, obviously none. So, offensive line is all about cohesion. When you watch them at practice, they're holding hands. It's all about cohesion, right? And sometimes, and I'm not making excuses, they were not good in week 1. They didn't block well, and they mentally weren't sharp, which led to those penalties. But it's all about cohesion and chemistry on an offensive line. And I think we saw a little bit more of that today. That's a much bigger challenge next week. Tennessee's defensive line coach is Rodney Garner. That's a guy that I covered for many years in the SEC. He's built a fairly strong defensive lineup at Tennessee. They're going to give Florida multiple looks. They're going to get after it. It's going to be probably a group that's going to be at least as physical, if not more, than Utah. So we will see, but it's certainly a step in the right direction, which is absolutely what Florida needed. All right. Let's get to some more. Let's see. Austin Rogers. All right, let's go back. Thank you for understanding the question thank you for understanding the question was referring to penalties. Do you think the freshman should be starting at receiver? just commit to the future. Well, that's a couple separate things. Yeah, you're right. The penalties, he cleaned that up completely. Now, if it rears its head again next week, that's an issue. Look, special teams, again, not great tonight. That's a problem. That is a problem. That will cost you close games if you don't get those things cleaned up. But the offensive line, whereas the special teams really didn't make a move forward, the offensive line did. All right. So I don't think there's any question about that. So now they've got the penalties kind of cleaned up. Now it's time to start blocking a little bit better consistently against the good teams. Your next question, do I think the freshmen should be starting at receiver? Well, you only have so many receivers, and Ricky Pearsall is your number one guy. I don't think there's any question about that. Eugene Wilson is a guy we saw get a lot more involved in the offense tonight. Let me pull up his stats real quick for you. Let me get that for everybody. Eugene Wilson, Trey, goes by Trey. Eugene Wilson, the freshman receiver from Tampa Gaither, he had one rush for 18 yards. I think that was that end around, and he had 4 catches for 36 yards. So those two guys look like your best 2 receivers. Now, Khalil Jackson did not play tonight. He was hurt. He's banged up. He's got some promise, obviously. The other freshman, Aiden Mizell, 2 catches for 25 yards tonight. Andy Jean, I believe, played some. Is it time to make a change at receiver, though? I don't know. I mean, they're still growing. They're still, like Eugene Wilson's, either if he's not going to start against Tennessee, he's going to be playing a significant role in that game. The other guys, not sure about yet. They may need to be worked a little more slowly into things. You still have some other receivers out there. Blocking in an SEC game is going to be much more crucial for a receiver than it was tonight. They weren't necessarily needed to block as much on the perimeter in the running game because the offensive line was so effective. That changes when you play an SEC team. All right. That changes when you play an SEC team. Your wide receivers damn sure better know how to block. And sometimes that's the issue with freshman receivers. And I'm not saying that's the case with Aiden Mizell or Andy Jean or even Eugene Wilson. But sometimes it can be kind of the last hurdle that keeps them from playing 40 snaps instead of 7 snaps. So my guess is they're going to get worked into the rotation a little bit more each week. First SEC game, there's going to be some jitters, right? There's always some of that. And so, it's too soon to tell, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Eugene Wilson proved last week that he was phenomenal in space and just had that extra gear and looked like there were some special skill sets there. So he's proven his worth already. Aiden Mizell, some catches tonight. Let's get him the ball a little bit more here and there, see what he can do after the catch. That's still one of the things Florida's got to get better at after the catch. Now, tonight was more of a check down game. A lot of the flare out passes into the flat, they weren't giving Mertz too much, but also, look, they didn't want to make any mistakes. The offense was flowing. Let's run the ball. Let's stay consistent running the ball. Let's not beat ourselves through the passing game. Also, let's not give Tennessee too much on film. And I think that was Tennessee's plan today as well. If you watched any of their game, it was a lot of the short stuff. So we'll see. We'll see about that. MC says, post-game show, love it, long needed. Well, unfortunately, you got to listen to me for 45 minutes to an hour. All right. I grew up in Gainesville. I've been going to games since about 1982. I think my first Florida game was the James Jones. I'm trying to figure out which hand he caught it. The one-handed catch. I was in the same end zone, but the other side of the field where Florida beat Miami 17-14, turned around and beat Southern Cal 17-9. The next week, and the Gators were off and running to their first SEC and national champion. Well, it didn't go that way. They ended up getting blown out by Georgia later in the season, and other things unraveled as well. But that's kind of my background. I've been going to this place behind me for so long, I can't even tell you. I remember Southern Miss, and we're getting off track here. Southern Miss in 1992, I was at the game, and that's I got the call after the game that my father had died. So special meaning. Florida Field always been an important place in my life. My dad was a student at Florida, just a place that's always been special to us. But I'm glad you like the show. We're going to get back to the actual game and less of my bluster here. Ryan Howard says one freshman should start. We all know who that is. Talking about the receivers, Eugene Wilson. I think he's right there. But let's see what a healthy Khalil Jackson can do too. All right. Go Gators says, maybe it's just me, but I enjoyed this game a lot better than last week. Yeah, I don't think you were the only one there, man. I mean, last week was disturbing on so many levels because I think a lot of people went into that game, and you guys correct me. Look, listen, put your comments in there. But I think a lot of people went into that game wanting to know or thinking that Florida had a talent deficiency, but maybe the coaches could get them up a little bit. I think what I'm trying to say is nobody knew how much talent they had. And then after the game, you're thinking, if they didn't beat themselves and there weren't some the awful penalties, and obviously the coaches got a lot of critique. But I came out of that game thinking they might have a little more talent than I think. I needed to see more, okay? But again, today, a feel-good game. You've got to win these games. I mean, we talked about the 1982 team. After the week after losing to Georgia, I think they beat Southwest Texas State, which is now Texas State, 77-14. Didn't really mean much that year. Some years it does mean something. You kind of get that momentum going again. And I think Billy Napier, we're going to get his post-game show up on our YouTube channel, later tonight. I'm sure he's going to say that they needed this, that they were clean and all that. But again, it's a winning against Power 5 teams. I mean, that's what it's all about. And if Florida turns around and loses next week and then loses to Kentucky 2 weeks after that, we're not going to remember this. But if Florida goes out and looks better next week, all right, if they look better next week, then we're going to see something. We may look back to this game and say, okay, this is where they sort of took a deep breath, cleaned up all the garbage that happened out in Utah, and took a forward took a mess. I can't even get the words out here. Took a step in the right direction. Somebody's texting me. Let's see if it's important. It does not appear to be important. Okay. So sometimes it matters. Sometimes it doesn't. I go back to that 93 season. And I don't know whether this team, that was a great team, Danny Werfel, Terry Dean, but you remember Florida went up to Kentucky and was god-awful. 7 interceptions and escaped with my buddy Chris Doring's catch. Doring's got a touchdown. So they escape with the last-second touchdown at Kentucky. Okay, but they had barely won that game, and they played terribly. Again, 7 interceptions. The defense was pretty good to hold Kentucky to only, I think it was 20 points. But, you came out of that game with a lot of doubts. But that last drive, that rally, just something sparked with that team, right? And the next week, I believe, was Tennessee at home. You guys remember that, 1993? And I think Florida played very well that week. So obviously 2 different situations, but you can build. Sometimes you got to feel good about yourself to play well. I had somebody inside the program tell me this week, hey, I think the team is going to be really good by week 12. But the talent is, the young guys are going to get better. There's going to be more chemistry. There's so many newcomers. The team should get better throughout the season. And I countered with, well, you would think so theoretically. But if you start losing games and losses start piling on top of each other, you know what happens? Sometimes when you're 3-5, you play like you're 3-5, even if you have talent superior to that, right? So there was somebody that mentioned earlier, should Florida go youth movement at receiver? And I've been thinking about that a lot. I don't necessarily think you would do that for, if you think they're the best players, absolutely. But just to go youth would essentially be, I don't want to say throwing in the towel on this season, but making it harder. There is something to be said for veteran players. If they lose their jobs fair and square, that's one thing. But to play younger guys over them just to build for next year, well, you always worry about what's right in front of you, not next year. So anyway, Austin, hey, just sub. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. All right, let's get in here. Ryan says, look clean. Florida look clean. All right. Next question. Waters of life. Let's eat some pie tonight, boys. Okay. I mean, that could mean many different things, so I'll just let that go. But Neil says, Keith reporting to us from the future. Yeah, look, guys, I got a white screen here, okay? I'm in my condo in Tampa. I got these high ceilings, the giant echo. Last week I was at Rice-Eccles Stadium in Utah. It was great. After the game, I didn't know where I was going to set up because reporters are working. And it turns out Scott Strickland left at the end of the game, the Florida AD, and I was able to use his suite. It was great. There was food in there, drinks. I didn't want to leave. I had my feet kicked up on the table, and then we had to do a show, unfortunately. All right, go Gators. Says, all I'm saying is my Gators bounce back prediction video was pretty close to the score, said 49-10. Okay. Well, now you're telling me to skip it, and I didn't see that. So I can't remember what I picked, maybe like 44-10. I never felt, and I think you guys probably agree, I never felt like Florida was just going to beat them 65-0. Now, could they? Yeah. But you've got those new clock rules, right? So when you're running the game, when you're running the ball, that clock is just, you're passing more now too. But it's a little harder on offenses. And Florida was really wanted to be plotting tonight, really wanted to establish the ground game, establish that mentality. Remember, this is a running team. This is a team that's supposed to be strong and physical in the running game. And so because of that, I never thought Florida would get 50, 60, 70 points because I didn't think they were going to throw the ball a whole lot. And really they didn't. I was surprised they threw 20 times. But anyway. All right, Neil's laughing at me. All right. All right, who do we have? Another LOL. Any questions? I mean, let's go back over some stats here. I'm going to get try to get Nick Della Torre on here in a minute, and we apologize for that. Normally, we're going to have multiple people on. I think for the Tennessee game, we may have a special guest after the game. Keep an eye on that. So let's go back to some key stats here. I've got to put my focals on, guys, because I'm getting so old. So let's get back to it. For those of you that don't know, that don't have access to the box score, we'll just go over this one more time. First downs, 33-6, Florida. And here's a big one. Florida, 5 of 6 on third down. You remember what Florida was last week on third down? Do you remember that? 1 of 13. 1 of 13. Pitiful, right? 5 of 6 tonight. They didn't have many third downs. You know, Florida was on fourth down tonight. They didn't have one. They didn't have a fourth down. So that's significant. Again, they didn't put themselves in bad spots. Look, even some of Steve Spurrier's teams played poorly against FCS teams. You just mentally, where are you? Where was Florida going to be mentally after last week's game, right? And Lee McGriff, when we had him on, the former Gator receiver and radio commentator, when we had him on earlier this week, he said, you know, all these kids are going to be more excited about the game than the fans because they only get so many games. And so they came out inspired. They played hard. They played fast. They played clean. That's all you can really ask. Can you really tell what kind of talent you have based off a game like this? No, but you can tell what the team's mental state was, and they took this game seriously. Okay, so that is significant. All right, next up, penalties, 4 for 20 for Florida. Not bad. 1 turnover, that fumble late. They established the ground game moves. We said possession, time of possession, 36 minutes for Florida, 23-51 for McNeese. Total offense, again, for Florida, 560 to 112. And on the ground, here's a big one, 327 yards for Florida, 46 for McNeese. So, again, you're not playing a very good opponent, but you're not – look, they gave him the one cheap touchdown at the end, but otherwise there wasn't really anything where you could point to and say, God, this again, outside of the special teams. Now, the missed PAT, concerning, you know, I mean, why does that continue to happen? Punts getting down within the 5-yard line. I mean, you know, that stuff that is going to eat you alive in big games. And you know how I know that? Because we just saw it last week. We just saw it last week where you had the special teams miscues. You had the long punts by the other team. One special team miscue, if my memory's right, led to a 50-plus yard field goal. Okay, so you did all these things that if you cleaned up this, if you didn't have the special teams miscues last week, that game is a fourth quarter game. Instead, it was a game where Florida scored in the fourth quarter, and you're thinking, well, maybe if they could score one more time, who knows what will happen. They weren't in that game, right? They were not. They got beat bad. Fact is, they got beat bad. Now, beat themselves, but they got beat bad. So you didn't want to see that. Now, what you need to see improvement out of the special teams soon, because it can cost you more games. And I don't think these guys can afford to lose many more games like that one. And I don't mean their jobs on the line or anything like that yet. Right. I'm talking just the mental aspect of the game. You know, those are death knells to you. All right. So let's get to some of your comments here. Wicked Fresh, great name. I like seeing them run out of the pistol. Need to see more of that. I agree. I think that seemed to be pretty effective. It might play to the advantages, the strengths of the offensive line. I like that. All right. Let's get to some more here. I hope I don't put any up that are too bad. Tracy says, would have rather seen McNeese load the box like Utah to see how UF adapts. That's true. I would agree with that in a sense. But if, you know, it's kind of tricky for those teams like McNeese. They know they're not going to win. They know that going. Like, they're not dumb, right? And so they had to – they won't – how do I say this? Those teams still want to play the way they play. That they don't want to say it's a one-game thing and we're going to do what they want to play the way they want to play. And I'm sure they did that to see how they would adapt to certain situations for future games within their conference and all that. I mean, that's my speculation anyway. But I think what we know Tennessee, now you had Utah load the box. You had McNeese not. Now, what does Tennessee do? Now, Tennessee probably being that knowing, again, how they do defense, probably blitzes here, their stunts, all that stuff. But I think it'll probably just be 4-man front, like my guy against your guy. It's going to be physical in the middle, right? So it's going to be interesting to see. All right, let's see. Let's get to some. Tracy says, hoping we spread the field against the Vols. We would have beat Utah if we spread the field. You know, they just what do they say in football? You get behind the chains on first down, you get a false start, or you get an incompletion or a negative play. And some teams, Steve Spurrier teams, could fall, second 15. It wasn't a big deal. I don't think Billy Napier's teams are built for that. But in that game, Florida sort of fell behind the chains, got behind the chains, so to speak. In other words, they fell behind. They didn't move the ball great early. They had that big miscue when they were down 7-3, the penalty, and then the missed field goal, and then Utah scores. And so they were playing from behind the chains, right? And they never quite got back into their game plan. And quite frankly, I know I've referenced Steve Spurrier multiple times. We have seen him do that. We saw him in the 90s in Florida, some of Florida's significant losses, abandon what they did best, okay, which was balance. His teams were balanced. Yes, he went up and down the field pass, but the balance was the key to all that. And so when Florida got out of rhythm early and fell behind against Utah, the whole game plan changed. And, it was interesting. Now, the part that I thought was interesting tonight was that Graham Mertz with all the outlet passes, all the checkdowns. And I was watching from TV, so anybody at the game, please tell me, what did you see in the secondary? Were guys not getting open because McNeese was dropping people, or were guys not getting open because they can't get open, which would be concerning? I couldn't tell. You know how the TV just focuses on the line of scrimmage and the ball. So we'll see. But, I think both Florida and Tennessee wisely played close to the vest today. Would you guys agree with that? I mean, you're not going to show them everything. You got to first assure yourself you're going to win, okay? But you got to do that. But you're not going to show everything. All right, let's get to some more questions here. Jawan, hey, what's up, man? I believe after watching how Florida played tonight, moving forward, I believe we have a realistic chance to win every game until Florida plays Georgia. Let me pull up the schedule real quick here. I'm going to find this because I was talking to somebody about this the other day. There are some if Florida, where's the schedule at? I'm looking all around here. There we go. If Florida beats Tennessee, all right, that's big if, right? Tough game. If Florida where'd we go? If Florida beats Tennessee, then you play Charlotte. You're probably going to win that, right? Then you play at Kentucky. Well, all of a sudden, Kentucky doesn't seem as scary of a game. Now, they've got a new quarterback. Don't forget that. Sometimes it takes time. Does it sound familiar, guys? So they struggled against Eastern Kentucky today. Devin Leary's their quarterback. You may remember him from when he played at NC State. Hot and cold quarterback. I think he had a very good season 2 years ago, if my memory's right, and was highly inconsistent last year, but he got the high upside. In fact, some SEC schools, including Auburn, brought him in for visits. But if you can win those two games, or even one of those two, you're probably setting yourself up for the potential of a winning season. I know that doesn't sound like much, but they've got to take steps. Now, if you win both those games, you're sitting at 4-1, and Vanderbilt comes to town. Well, Vanderbilt did not play well today in a loss to Wake Forest. Okay. Now, I don't think this is the same Wake Forest we're used to seeing. I don't think that. The quarterback is now at Notre Dame, Sam Hartman, and Wake Forest won in Winston-Salem 36-20. So if you're Florida and you win, then you start winning these games. Then you're at South Carolina. Well, their offensive line looks like they're going to not be great this year. They've got to really improve. So I'm with you on this. I think if Florida can beat Tennessee, it's setting up for them to exceed some expectation. Now, if you lose to Tennessee and you lose to Kentucky, God forbid, then it could go sideways pretty fast, right? You cannot lose that Vanderbilt game. You cannot. There will be no coming back from that game this season. That's my prediction if you lose that game. So we'll see. All right, let's see here. All right, Neil, I wish Billy Napier would have left Max Brown and Trey Webb in the game. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I get what you're saying. It's just so hard. Those are obviously backups, the backup quarterback, Max Brown, and the backup running back, third-string running back, Trey Webb from Jacksonville, who looked really good tonight. We talked about him earlier. Let me get back to his stats here. Webb was, forgive me for doing my usual and all that stuff, but Webb was, let me get you his stats, 14 carries for 71 yards tonight, 5.1 yards a carry, but he wasn't always running behind that first-team offensive line either. So he looked shifty. He hit the hole. Now, there were some gaping holes, massive holes out there, right? Massive. Any of us could have run through these things, right? So it was, it was the ability. I've got to send out a tweet here real quick. Somebody's messaging me to get something out, but it was one of those things where you saw, let's get this out real quick. I think that's already out. You saw some flashes of a skill set, right? So you're now feeling, the transition from high school to college is pretty big. Running backs, that may be one of the easier positions to make the transition. But now all of a sudden, instead of feeling really good about 2 running backs, now you look at Trey Webb and you say, okay. Because you remember you had the guy Cam Carroll get hurt in the preseason, one more injury, and it gets thin quick. You can go from a lot of depth to very little depth quickly. So now you've got a freshman running back who's flashed some skills tonight, right? So maybe you can work him in a couple carries against Tennessee, a couple against Kentucky, and then all of a sudden you feel better about the depth you have because, again, guys go down all the time, right? And also you have to build for next year. You have to worry about next year. So I like that. Max Brown was 2 of 3 at quarterback for 24 yards. It's tricky because they also wanted to get Michael Leone some snaps. Again, another position where if something happened to your starter, you have very little experience behind you. You've got to get these guys just out there and feeling comfortable. Would you have liked to gotten Max Brown more snaps? Absolutely. But at the expense of Michael Leone not getting any it's always a catch-22 for these coaches, right? I mean, let's be honest here. So give me 1 second, guys. I got to plug something in. Hang tight. All right, let's get to your next question here. And having to go solo right now, guys. And I'm no rocket scientist, as you can probably tell. But all in all, I'd give Florida a pretty good grade for the performance tonight. It'd be hard not to, quite frankly. I mean, there were very little complaints. I think you guys all agree. So let's get to some more of your questions here. Hope everybody can hear me. I'm figuring out this mic thing. Neil says, any reason we didn't see the JUCO running back Jacoby Jackson over Eddie Battle? Isn't Jackson on scholarship? Well, I couldn't tell you that. We're going to get you that answer if we can. I'm sure he's just performing better in practice. Sometimes that's all it comes down to. Or it's either that or he's got some, he could be a little dinged up. We don't know. I don't know. We're going to get you an answer to that one. All right. All right. Waters of Life says, would like to see Florida step up its passing game and find more openings in the red zone. Look, I haven't disagreed with a single post tonight, but here's the thing. That was not the goal tonight. The goal tonight was to reclaim your identity as a program, to reclaim your identity as a running team, right? And so, that was mission number 1. And also you taketh what the defense giveth, right? So, Florida, McNeese gave Florida a deep post, I think I want to say, or maybe it was just a seam. I don't know, by Ricky Pierce. Like, remember, I don't get to see the back end when I'm sitting at home of the defense, but that they gave Florida that play late. He had man coverage deep and they threw deep, but normally you just kind of do what the defense gives you. And so I don't think Florida was given a whole lot, but also they really wanted to establish the run. Let me check in with somebody real quick. All right, I'm checking in with Nick Della Torre, Gators Online, Gator beat writer. So I'm going to ask you guys, what grade would you give Florida tonight? I think it's based on, you don't look at the score. What were your needs? What were your goals? You wanted to clean up the offensive line play with the penalties. You did that. You wanted them to block better. We think they blocked better. I mean, obviously it's an inferior opponent. We think they blocked better. You wanted your defense to be dominant. They were, and you wanted that feel-good win. So I think the only area where you look at Florida and you say they didn't really make much progress from last week, got to be that the special teams. It's got to be driving you guys crazy. All right, Tracy says, absolutely, we have a chance to beat Tennessee. I would agree with that. We'll see. Jawan says Tennessee struggled in the first half against Virginia, and the Austin Peay game left a lot to be desired. Good chance to beat Tennessee. Joe Milton's their quarterback now. Much more of a running threat. He can run the heck out of the ball. There's no doubt about that. But, they got to be thinking, okay, well, we're 2-0, but we haven't exactly set the world on fire either. Now, they're going to be fired up. They're going to be motivated for this game. But this is going to be their first true road game of the year. I think they played Virginia in Nashville. That's pretty friendly confines. Now, maybe they stayed in a hotel there the night before. They probably did. But let's see here. Nick says he's about to record our podcast. 30 minutes in. 1 second. I can go. I'm trying to figure out how much longer we're going to go here. Okay. So we're going to try to get Nick De La Torre on in just a little bit. And he's at the game. He's recording something right now. He should be with us, hopefully 10, 15 minutes. So hopefully everybody can hang on. All right. So let's see here. All right. Ryan Howard says, what do you think the spread is going to be next week? Tennessee 3.5. I think that's probably about right. Maybe 4. The Swamp is, you're talking about what are the better home field advantages in college football still, even with Florida not being the Florida we're all used to. They still generally, play much better at home than they do on the road. So yes, you're saying somebody says, let me pull this up. Jackson was not dressed. That's Khalil Jackson. So somebody mentioned earlier, should the younger receivers get in? They're going to get worked in. Florida's never going to be a team that passes like they did last week. If Florida's throwing 44 times in a game, that's probably a bad thing. And, so let me give me 1 second here. 1 second, guys. All right. Sorry about that. And, okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So, I think that could be a Khalil Jackson. You don't need to play him. I think it was a minor injury from what I'm told. I don't think you necessarily needed him tonight. And so, we'll see. Jawan says Tennessee 8.5. The bookies don't respect Florida. Well, they got to earn the respect. They've got to earn the respect, all day long. Here's some grades. Tracy says B.5 for the Gators. Neil says B+, or did I say B.5? What does that mean? B+, B.5, same thing. Neil says B+, don't like the fumble at the end to ruin the shutout. Yeah, you could see if you were watching the game on TV, you could see a very upset Billy Napier on the sideline after that play. Just unbelievable. You feel bad for the kid, obviously, but when you get in there, you have to take care of the football first and foremost. All right, Jawan says, I give the defense an A and the offense a B. Waters of Life. How do you see Florida's matchup with FSU toward the end of the season? What can we do to get to their level? That is so far in advance. Teams are so much different in week 12 than they are in week 2. It's funny when you watch these games last week. Remember, you guys all watched when the Florida game was done and you went back and you watched all these games Saturday, all the snap judgments. Everybody thought they had the whole season already figured out after week 1. And look, I'm guilty of the same things too. Remember, Alabama looked pretty good last week. Texas didn't look good at all against Rice. Texas just beat Alabama by 10, guys, in Tuscaloosa. Okay? Every game is its own separate entity. If for Florida to compete with FSU, it's at home. Okay? So that's going to help. Couple questions here. Where will Florida's mindset be in week 12? Well, that's going to depend on their record. They're going to be fired up whether Florida has 8 wins or 4 wins. They're going to be fired up. But again, as I said earlier, sometimes when you have 8 wins or 9 wins or 10 wins, you play like you have 9 or 10 wins. You play above or where your potential is or even above. Sometimes when you have 3 or 4 wins, you play beneath your potential because you're not right here. You're not right here. You got to be right physically and you got to be right here at all times, okay? We all watched Ben Shelton play the U.S. Open semifinal yesterday, but great match, played hard as could be against Novak Djokovic. Arguably the greatest tennis player of all time. All right. The match for Ben to be in that, to have a better chance, he was going to have to play above what he's been playing. And he did a little bit, but not enough. So I think Florida's going to have to play a little bit above itself based on what we've seen so far. Now, we think Florida's defensive line is very good and probably going to continue to get better. They can give FSU's offensive line some trouble. You've got a scrambling quarterback, though, Jordan Travis. You also have big receivers, 2 big, tall receivers that are going to create a lot of problems for everybody FSU plays. I know you don't want to hear that. But I don't think FSU's got a great offensive line. On the other side of the ball, FSU's defensive line seems to be getting better, and they've got one of the premier edge rushers in the country in the transfer they picked up last year. So it's going to be a challenge. But what you see out of these teams today may not be what you see from them 2 months down the road. So we'll see. All right, Nick De La Torre informs me that he is, let's see, I could do 10. Okay, perfect. Looks like we may get Nick in 10 minutes. You don't have to listen to my garbage anymore. All right, let's see here. Neil says, let's get your note up here, Neil. Neil says, I'm watching this quarterback from Arizona State, and he's got a great arm. Who is he? Well, Neil, we know you're not kidding. It's Jaden Rashada, the former Florida commit, and I felt like last week he got a little too much love. He's going to be a good player, good strong arm, all that stuff. But at the end of the game, his statistics were 18 to 31 for, I think, 233 yards in that range. And Arizona State only beat Southern Utah guys by 3 points. So he was making all these freshmen All-America, or, for that week. Yeah, freshman of the week, all that stuff. And I thought it was a little too much too soon. Arizona State's probably going to struggle this year. They've had a lot of turnover, new coaching staff. But probably in a couple of years, he's going to be a really good player. All right. Jawan, making fun of Neil there. Let's get to some more comments here. How big is the Tennessee game for recruiting? Well, first of all, we know that a lot of big name guys are going to be at that game. All right, a lot of big name guys. I'm pull up the list for you right now. But it's going to be significant. I mean, look, NIL is so big these days, guys. I mean, that's where people keep asking me, is the class going to hold together if Florida doesn't do well? Well, look, even if Florida does well, there's always going to be guys. You got to work hard. I'm going to give you two names of guys that Florida's going to have to recruit through the whistle to the very end. Mekhi Barrow, the big defensive tackle from the Atlanta area, and Nasir Johnson, the big defensive tackle from that road that's, what's that interstate from Atlanta to Savannah, 26? He's in Dublin, Georgia. Well, those two guys are still getting recruited by other schools, all right? And so Florida's going to have to recruit those guys all the way to the end, no matter whether they're winning or losing, okay? So it's but right now the feeling among the commits is they all seem to be fairly locked in. A lot of them are going to be next week. Florida quarterback Florida quarterback commit DJ Lagway was at the game tonight in Gainesville. He'll be back next week. Some of his big targets expected at the game. LJ McCray, 4-star defensive lineman from Daytona Beach, Mainland, a guy that is maybe the top overall remaining target for the Florida Gators, certainly in the top group. His teammate is expected to be there. Zay Mincy, the 4-star cornerback from Daytona Beach, Mainland. Now, Jordan Seaton, Florida's top remaining offensive tackle target from Bradenton IMG, was going to officially visit for that game, and he no longer is coming that week. He'll be there later on. A lot of young guys are expected to be there. So at this point, 2024 class, there's a lot of hay already in the barn, guys. Like, the class is almost done, okay? So you don't have too many 2024 targets left, but you got a lot of 2025 kids. And these kids are going to be committing in 2, 3, 4, 5 months. Elijah Griffin, one of the top recruits in the country, 5-star defensive lineman from Savannah, Georgia, is going to be there. Georgia's going to be the team to beat there. Maybe you can impress him. Maybe he has an incredible experience Florida-Tennessee game day. 5-star safety DJ Pickett down near me in Zephyr Hills, Florida, just north of Tampa. He's expected to be there. Other guys, 4-star edge Javian Hilson of Cocoa. 4-star quarterback Ryan Montgomery of Ohio. 4-star defensive lineman Jalen Wiggins of Tallahassee. Florida probably leads for him. And with Ryan Montgomery, the 4-star quarterback from Ohio, Florida's very much a top contender with him. The Gators also feel good about 4-star safety Hilton Stubbs of Jacksonville Mandarin. Another 4-star quarterback is coming in, Antoine Hill from Warner Robins, Houston County, right where the Buc-ee's is in the state of Georgia on I-75. That's an interesting one. His cousin was Trey Hill, who was Georgia's starting center just a few years ago. Auburn, 3-star defensive line commit, probably will be a 4-star at some point. Malik Autry, he's from Opelika, right outside of Auburn. He's going to be there. So it's going to be a heck of a prospect list. Here's an interesting name for you. 2026 quarterback Dia Bell from American Heritage and Plantation, down in Fort Lauderdale. Remember who his dad is? Raja Bell, the former NBA player, really promising young 2026 quarterback. So there's going to be a ton of guys there. The atmosphere is going to be significant. You want that to stick in the heads of those younger guys. And with the older guys, the kids that are in 2024, you want DJ Lagway in their ear. You want all the other commits, Miles Graham and DJ Lagway. There's not two better recruiters on the coaching staff than those guys are. I mean, they are all in with Florida. You want them to really get after it and really sell the program, not oversell it, but sell the program, make LJ McCray feel comfortable. LJ McCray, the 4-star defensive lineman from Daytona Beach, Mainland, you're looking at a top 5 of Florida, Auburn, Florida State, Miami, Georgia. I don't think Auburn's got a chance. The other 4 teams all feel like they have a chance. Georgia, growing confidence. FSU growing confidence. He was there at their game last week against LSU in Orlando. He's going to officially visit there October 7th. His birthday is October 18th. We could see a commitment maybe the week or two after that. Miami feeling like they've made a move with him. All out battle for him. That's what happens. That's what happens with the elite guys, right? So Zay Mincy, his teammate, probably a Florida, Miami, Alabama battle. Alabama's got a lot of defensive backs already committed. Maybe that helps them with Florida with Zay Mincy. We will see. All right. Next question. Do I think Florida needs more challenging games starting the season? No. I think everybody in the SEC has kind of got the same formula. You got to play so many tough SEC games that you want some breathers in there. Now, here's the problem. There ain't no many. Next year, there's one breather because you'll recall next year's Florida schedule, and it drives Florida fans crazy. And Scott Strickland, the AD, is never going to hear the end of this, and quite frankly, probably deserves to never hear the end of it. Florida's going to play Miami, FSU as always, UCF, and then the conference schedule, which includes Georgia, Tennessee, LSU, Texas on the road, by the way. And so, yeah, you want these cupcakes. You got to be able to play young guys too. If you didn't have games like this, there are guys that literally would get 10 snaps all season. They're out there every day. They deserve it. They need to be in the game. They need to get action. They need to get snaps. Guys get hurt. You need to know what a guy can do. Practice. The reality of it is, guys, Florida practices are probably more competitive than the game was today, but you still need to be able to see what kids can do in front of 88,000 people. So you need games like this. And, and they also help coaches' records too. Back in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, you go back and you look at Florida's schedule, they didn't play games like this. George Washington, I think, in Ray Graves' first year in 1960. But you look in the 1970s, Florida opened with NC State one year. Yeah, NC State. Well, you know who was coach of NC State when Florida played them in 1974? 75, excuse me, Lou Holtz, okay? They opened with SMU. They played Pitt at Florida Field. The Pitt Panthers played at Florida Field in 77, the year after they won the national title with Tony Dorsett. And that year they had Matt Cavanaugh. They played Cal at Florida Field when Cal had Steve Bartkowski. A lot of you Falcons fans remember Steve Bartkowski, the quarterback, and a running back named Chuck Muncie, who was an NFL superstar as well. So you didn't see games like this. And I think coaches got tired of going 5-5 every year, quite frankly. So we'll see. All right, next question here. Appreciate everybody listening. Hit the like button. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Nick Delatorre is telling me he's going to be on the show any minute. We're waiting for him. You're probably all falling asleep listening to my BS for 52 minutes here. All right, next question. Mike says, my Gators should be able to come out and play influence football against UT. Our defense will have a huge day. Mike, that is the hope. The offense is still sort of finding its way. I mean, look, they look good today, obviously, but far inferior opponent. But we don't know whether they're going to be able to run the ball effectively in the SEC or not yet. We just don't know. Now, what they can control is we're not going to shoot ourselves in the foot anymore. Let's say no more of those stupid penalties. But how are they going to be able to run the ball in the SEC? We just don't know. Okay, so it is probably going to be up to the defense to keep Florida in that game at least early, right? And so the defense seems to be growing in confidence. Offense is about controlling your emotions. Defense is about playing with emotion, right? And the defense looked inspired tonight. They played hard at seemingly every snap against a team where, quite frankly, you would understand if they maybe lost their concentration at times. The touchdown at the end wasn't starters that they allowed it, and also the backups on offense gift wrapped in that TD. So, Mike, I think the defense, if they do have a huge game like you say, Florida's going to have a chance to win that game. I don't think there's any question. When you go back to all those great wins over Tennessee through the years, that was one of the common denominators. The defense stepped up. Now, there was that, 62-38 game at the Swamp that one year that Florida won. But even in that game, after Florida fell behind big, even in that game, the defense made plays that got the game turned around. Nobody will ever forget that was there or watched it on TV. Lawrence Wright's hit on Tennessee receiver Joey Kent that caused the fumble, and Florida scored. All right. Now, I don't think they scored on that. A few plays later. But that was a difference maker, even in a game where you gave up 30-something points, right? So you're absolutely right. Can they get to the quarterback? Joe Milton has not proven, Tennessee's quarterback, that he can be effective for 60 minutes as a passing quarterback. So we will see. All right, let's get on to some more questions here. All right. I absolutely hate the wide receiver screens, but as long as they're working and getting positive yardage, I'm good. Well, what are they saying coaching? I mean, I am not a coach, right? I mean, what do I know? I mean, I've been covering this for years, and coaches probably think, that they're not calling me. Billy Napier, I know, obviously, because of what I do, and I knew him from when he worked at Clemson, but he's not calling me asking for advice on plays, okay? But what do we know about coaches? They do things to set up other things. You spread the field to open things up in the middle. You run plays so other teams that you're playing in the future have to respect those plays and practice against those plays. So there's a lot more than just sometimes that 2-yard gain could set something up for 7 weeks down the road. It's a crazy game. And you also got to go with your gut too. You got to go with your feel. And, if you're playing checkers with your buddy, sometimes what's the common sense move? Okay, you do that 99 times out of 100. Sometimes you go with your gut too. And that's what coaches have to do. But look, as long as you're getting positive yardage, as long as they're not putting themselves in 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, which is a danger zone for Florida right now. We haven't seen anything yet that gives you a ton of confidence if they're in a 3rd and 8 against a big time SEC team. So I understand what you're saying, but I think it's probably more of let's just develop a whole repertoire and give the other team something to think about. All right. Mike, you got a lot of questions. All right. Going to be interesting to see if Florida can run, if Florida can continue to run with Webb all season. If they can do that, very good season running the ball. Well, yeah, if he's playing, that's probably only one of two things. Somebody got hurt, which God forbid, you don't want that to happen. Or Florida's got a comfortable lead right now. You hope later on in the season, he can be a guy that can give your top 2 running backs a little bit of a breather in the first half so they're fresh toward the end. Now, if he ends up being better than either of those guys, and I don't think he will be this year, but if he did, he will get his carries. He will have more value. His stock for Florida will skyrocket. But right now, what you need him to be is a serviceable 3rd running back, and that's an important role. In 4th quarters of these games, you may need to run an ETN or a Johnson, and you may need them to have fresh legs. And what do we see? I go back in history, a lot of Florida games, and one comes to mind, 1984, Auburn right behind me. Florida won 24-3 over a top 10 Auburn team, top 10, top 11 Auburn team, Bo Jackson team. Very close game to the 4th quarter. Florida had a ton of running backs. You'll remember them. John L. Williams, Neil Anderson, James Massey. At that point, I think Lorenzo Hampton was already gone to the NFL with the Dolphins, and James Jones was already playing for the Lions. But they had a stable running backs, and they were able to run those guys through the game, so they were fresh toward the end. And what happened? Neil Anderson breaks off a long run that broke Auburn's back. You need that in the SEC. Oh, we got somebody here. We got a special guest. All right, Nick. Nick, I just went an hour. These people are absolutely disgusted. They don't want to look at me. They don't want to hear me. Nick Torre, Gators Online beat writer for the Florida Gators. Nick, just takeaways from this game, man. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, listen, that's a bad football team that Florida played, but you can't – these players don't pick and choose who they play. So it doesn't matter if it's a Alabama or McNeese. You have to go out and try to dominate. And Florida dominated today. You're going to face much tougher opponents throughout the year, but I think it's encouraging. The biggest thing to me, I think, is you cleaned up, for the most part, procedural penalties. That was something that was unacceptable in the season opener. Played a pretty much clean game tonight. I think it's just from the standpoint of the players. They hadn't won a game in like 10 months, and of course some of that's the offseason, but you lost 4 straight games. Just getting in the locker room with your teammates and being able to celebrate, I think does wonders for your confidence. The offensive line, I think Lindell Hudson looked really good when he played. You had guys going off. I think Montrell Johnson went for over 100 yards, 6th time in his career. Trevor Etienne, he scores. Montrell scored twice. Trent Webb scored twice. Graham Mertz said, "Don't leave me out." He got in on the action. I think Florida got back to their identity today. And granted, you had one 300-pounder on that defensive line. You're going to face bigger defensive lines, but I think you're building confidence that, hey, we can do this. We can compete. We know how to win. And I think it'll be a great environment. I don't believe that there were 88,000 people here today, but the people that were here were loud. I think the students who I get on all the time were in their seats early. So shout out to the students that were there. It was a really good environment. That was one of my favorite Tom Petty's. They turned the lights off with the flashlights on the phone. So I think overall this is a night Florida needed. I would not have felt good. Florida would not have felt good. Gator Nation would not have felt good leaving with like a 30-17 win. For Florida to dominate, other than, probably should have had a 49-0 shutout without the fumble there late. So I think this is a game exactly what the doctor ordered. You took that script, went straight to the pharmacy, and this is the pill you needed to take after the last 4 games, really, and then the last game last week, 9 days ago.
Yeah, Nick, Nick's got a write, by the way, so we're only going to get him for about 5 minutes. We want you to be able to read some of his brilliant story. I mean, the guy's he's a Mark Twain storyteller. We got to get to his stuff. Yeah, no, but Nick, Tennessee struggled. Didn't look good today against Austin Peay. Kentucky did not look good against Eastern Kentucky, which got blown out by Cincinnati. So we'll see here. But Jeffrey Chambers asked, does Florida get Kingsley Eguakin starting center back next week? Do we know? Is there anything up on that? What's your gut telling you if you don't have any concrete?
Yeah. So if you've been on Gators Online, Billy likes to go upper body, lower body. I've been reporting and told everyone on our site it's a high ankle sprain. He got a high ankle sprain heading into the Tennessee game. Will be about 6 weeks since the high ankle sprain. So that's right on the timeline. To me, there's no sense in throwing him out there. You don't need Kingsley Eguakin to win today. Get him full rest. I think you should. I would expect Kingsley back for Tennessee, and that'll be big for the offensive line. Not that Jake Slaughter has been disappointing at all, but Kingsley's a guy who's started 26 games, has played in 40. He's a veteran when it comes to calling checks, the lines. Him and Austin Barber are co-leaders of that entire room. So getting him back is going to be big for Florida next week.
A couple more questions with Nick De La Torre. Again, everybody, make sure you like this on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave a comment. If you missed some of it, it was just basically me talking for 52 minutes, Nick. It was
that's easy for you to do, Keith.
It was probably as painful for me as it was for anybody listening. All right, so Nick, a couple highlights, and then we'll talk about one of the negatives, and we'll let you get back to work. But I mean, Eugene Wilson, we knew he was probably going to get the ball more tonight. Boy, he is electric, man. I mean, he's. What'd you think? He's not Percy Harvin, but maybe like Percy Harvin light. Just the way he gets to his top end speed is so exciting to watch. Like, he's not like a big long strider, but like 2-3 steps and he's 0 to 60. He's like a Tesla, like a Model 3 Tesla, a little one. He's exciting. He's going to be a guy you continue to feature. I think I still want to see him on special teams, but you might have to get him a whole new jersey. I think the jersey thing spooked him last week. You had Ricky Pearsall back there for the most part, but Eugene Wilson is going to be a special player for Florida. And I think obviously with Khalil Jackson out with a foot injury, that he was going to get his first start and going to be featured a little bit more. Now, I think you can still manufacture. You don't need to show a lot today, and I'm not ever going to use the excuse that Florida went vanilla. But I think you can find ways to get him the ball. He's the kind of talent where in practice, in the film room, I'm trying to figure out how do we get him the ball in space, because he'll make somebody miss. He'll make something happen. It's probably been since Kadarius Toney where Florida had a guy when he had the ball in his hands, you thought no idea what could happen, but something spectacular could happen. Nick, 2 more questions here. That's it. Defense. 6 first downs for McNeese, 112 yards of total offense. Look, it's not a great team. We know that. We already mentioned that. I mentioned it for 52 minutes, and you came in and mentioned it. But defense is about emotion, and you don't know how you're going to come out. And you just lost to Utah. It was a deflating game, somewhat humiliating in some sense for Florida. Not the score, but just the way they played. They weren't proud of the way they played, I don't think. Yeah. And so they came out with the emotion. Every play looked like the defense played hard, Nick. They looked like a fired-up group out there. Can we discern anything from what we saw tonight, and who stood out to you?
I think Scooby Williams had a really good game. One of probably the highlight hit. Shamar James led the team in tackles. Princely got a sack. Does that erase, being off sides on a 3rd down, or was that a 4th down? I can't remember right now. Scooby also got a sack. I think Jordan Castell had 3 tackles. I think I like Jakeem Jackson. I ran into him on the field after the game, and I told him, I'm like, hey, Ja, that second one, you got to get your hands on that. There's no one between you and the end zone. He laughed. He's like, yeah, I got to come up with that. Florida's got – the problem, I think, is, and I've said this over and over, Keith, the best players, in my opinion, on Florida's team are transfers who are a little bit older. That's good. Or the guys from the last 2 recruiting classes. So I think you're going to have some bumps and bruises, but this is a game where you get guys in. Jakeem Jackson plays a ton. You get Jordan Castell was already playing, but you get Bryce Thornton in the game. Collins is playing. Searcy's playing. You're getting all of these guys valuable experience. And like Max Brown goes in today, and everyone's been mad at me because I said like Max Brown's a twisted ankle. I don't know. There's no wood around me, but he's a twisted ankle away from being the starting quarterback and had never taken a college snap. I thought it was important for Florida to build a lead and get him into the game. So the biggest takeaway I get from the defense is getting these guys in who down the line, when you get to South Carolina, Georgia, Arkansas, these guys are going to have to be playing more reps, and now you're getting them valuable experience so they're not wide-eyed deer in the headlights when they get in.
A quick one. If Kingsley can't play next week, what happens with Slaughter? You think he starts again? Just yes or no?
No. Slaughter's to the bench if Kingsley's playing.
No. If Kingsley – I see what you mean. I'm reading the question wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. If Kingsley does – I thought they said I'm getting old. I thought they said if he doesn't play. Okay. Last thing here, Nick. Special teams, man. I mean, you had the blunder. You had the miscue on the kick tonight. Big deal or not a big deal? Keith, keep that one tight.
Keith, I know you want me to continue working with you, but I will accept the game changer coordinator job at Florida next year if they offer it. It's 15 straight games. You can't have a single clean game for Florida special teams. At this point, it's, I just expect them to mess up at some point in the game. And that's sad because when I was in college, that was their Meyer years. And it wasn't mess up. It was, when is Brandon James going to break a 60-yard punt return? When is something spectacular going to happen? Not, okay, when will the epic collapse happen? What is it going to be this week? And that's just the sad state of Florida's game changers right now.
All right, Nick Delatorre, Gators Online. He's got to go right. Nick, we look forward to – you want to promote what you got coming?
Yeah, we got one story up and start cranking on my thoughts of the game. Always enjoy writing that. And then got some stories to write. And then, listen, we're going to pump everything about McNeese out Friday or Saturday, Sunday. It's on to Tennessee Monday. Big week, big rivalry week. This is one growing up in the 80s, growing up in the 90s, being born in 88. This was the game for me growing up. So I always love Florida-Tennessee week and excited for this one.
Well, Nick, when you start hearing the hammering behind you, it's time to go. Go right. We'll talk to you later. We appreciate it. I'm going to stay on. Take care, Nick. I'm going to stay on for a couple of more minutes. We appreciate everybody. Let's just go over some, if you're just joining us, Florida beats McNeese 49-7. Some final stats. Florida 33 first downs, McNeese 6. Florida 5 of 6 on third downs. Held McNeese to 2 of 10 on third downs. Total offense, 560 yards for the Florida Gators, 112 for McNeese. I don't care who you're playing. 112 yards is not a lot. That's pretty good. 233 passing for Florida, 66 passing for McNeese. Florida rushing 327 yards on 51 attempts, and McNeese 46 on 26 attempts. Here's a big one, guys. Penalties for Florida, 4 for 20 yards, and we know one of them was late in the game. Time of possession, 36:09 to 23:51. Individually, let's get you some individual statistics. Graham Mertz, 14 of 17 for 193 yards, 1 touchdown. Very efficient game. Didn't make any mistakes. In fact, probably had 2 drops. No of 1 and another one that probably should have been caught. Easily could have been 16 to 17. Wasn't taking a lot of shots, played a clean, efficient game as the game manager, which is really, if you have a powerful running game, that's really all you need out of him, quite frankly. A big play here or there. Montrell Johnson led Florida in rushing, 15 carries, 119 yards, 2 touchdowns, 7.9 yards a carry. That's significant. Trevor Etienne, 84 yards on 11 carries, 7.6 yards per carry. Big one here, Treon Webb, 14 carries, 71 yards, 2 touchdowns, long of 16 yards. True freshman. Florida's long run of the night. This is interesting. They averaged 6.4 yards a carry, but the long run was only 22 yards. And somebody mentioned it earlier because McNeese was dropping so many people. So maybe giving a little bit up front, keeping Florida from hitting the big play. People are going to challenge Florida up front more in the future. We know that. We will see. But an efficient, clean game by the Florida Gators. It was never in doubt. McNeese never had any rhythm whatsoever on defense. I think the play of the game for the defense was probably Scooby Williams' third down sack on the first drive. After that, that was it. It was all she wrote. Neil says, Keith, Auburn, the school I used to cover, trailing Cal 10-7 in the first quarter. I knew that would be a tough game. That guy, Justin Wilcox, is a good coach. Wicked Fresh has a question, but I don't know the answer. So I'm just putting this up on the screen. So anybody that might, I don't know the answers to that. I'll have Nick and them look into it. Here's a complaint about the microphones. And we got one more. Alexander White says, my overall impression of Austin Armstrong's play calling after 2 weeks. That's hard. The defenses look good. What I don't know is it because of the play call. I mean, there haven't been any real criticisms. I think that, last week after that first touchdown that Utah scored on the first play of the game, I think the defense played exceptionally well, only allowed 260 yards. I think the question mark coming out of that game was, Utah was only 3 of 13 on third downs, which sounds good. But when they needed to make a play on offense for the first 3 quarters, they did, right? They made that first big play, the first series of the game. They scored to go up 14-3. They got the field goal late. That was nothing. But then in the third quarter, they had that short field, right? And if Florida stops, remember the ball that went through Ricky Pearsall's hands that Graham Mertz threw that was intercepted, gave them the ball. Utah, I believe, at the 11-yard line, and Utah scored a touchdown there. Not the defense's fault, but you really needed a field goal. There wasn't a point in time where that game was still in question where you said, here's a big stop that Florida got, right? So they stopped them after that. But again, it was 24-3. I mean, even if did any of you feel like Florida was going to win that game? It just didn't seem like it. It just didn't seem like it. So we don't really know. I think the jury's still out. I'm not questioning Austin Armstrong. He's probably done a fantastic job. I'm just saying Florida was good in the second half against Utah. Did not make any mistakes of significance tonight. Got after it. Played with a lot of emotion. Played smart. So I think they're trending in the right direction. Again, Nick mentioned it's a young defense. It's a young defense still. Shamar James is still just in his second year. There's a lot of young guys and a lot of newcomers. The cohesion is important. But now they say the biggest improvement you make is from week 1 to week 2. But how do we gauge that? Because McNeese isn't a Power 5 team. So we really don't know. We're going to learn a lot about this team and a lot about this defense next Saturday night at 7 p.m. at Florida Field. The Swamp. I still call it Florida Field. I can't get out of Steve Spurrier Field at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. We're going to learn so much more about the team then. But the sample size is still small. But no complaints about Austin Armstrong. He's one of the bright minds in college football. I mean, I think a lot of people. Now, I was hearing about him from when he was at Southern Miss because I know some people that worked on that staff. And so I've been hearing about him for a while, believe it or not. So no complaints, but I think we just don't know. Sample size is too small. Anyway. Gators 49, McNeese 7. Appreciate everybody stopping by. We'll do this after every game. Sometimes the audience is going to be bigger than others. Sometimes we're going to have more guests. Next week, we're going to have make sure there's more people talking to me after the game so you don't just have to listen to me. But a good, solid, feel-good victory for the Florida Gators tonight, 49-7. We're going to have shows all week. Sunday night, tomorrow night, we're going to have a live show. We're going to go over a lot of this stuff and look forward to Tennessee, a lot of what we saw tonight again. After we've had some time to digest it all, I'll look forward to the Tennessee game and Tennessee week, and we will have some shows throughout next week. So, again, appreciate everybody stopping by. I'm Keith Niebuhr with Gators Online. Hope everybody has a safe and fun weekend. It got wild in the SEC today, guys. I think everybody that thought they had things all figured out last week got a reality check today. Take care, everybody.